My father slammed his fist on the dining table so hard that every glass rattled. "You will testify for your brother," he growled, his face red with fury. "Family protects family. End of discussion." But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, staring at the man I used to believe stood for justice, for integrity. And in that silence, something inside him snapped. He lunged across the table at me, like a man possessed. My chair tipped as I pushed myself backward. My mother screamed. My sister tried to pull him back. But no one asked if I was okay. No one asked why I said no in the first place. Hey there, welcome to HD Reddit Stories. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been expected to lie, to betray your values, just to keep peace in a family that never really protected yours? Because that's where I found myself. I was asked to risk everything, my career, my integrity, even my mental health, for a brother who never gave a damn about me. And when I said no, they treated me like I was the criminal. So before I get into how everything spiraled, make sure you subscribe to HD Reddit Stories for more real-life tales that hit way too close to home. Back to that night. When my dad finally stepped back, breathing heavy like he just fought a war, he didn't apologize. He didn't regret it. He just muttered, "I can't believe how ungrateful you turned out." And I looked at every face around that table, my mom's disappointment, my sister's silence, my brother's smug little smirk, and I realized something that should have devastated me, but instead set me free. They didn't want my help. They expected my silence. And that was never going to happen. I didn't sleep the night after he lunged at me. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every second, his voice, the crack in the table, the rage in his eyes. It wasn't the first time he'd gotten angry, but it was the first time it felt like he saw me as the enemy. And maybe that's what broke me the most. I used to believe that even when we didn't agree, family was supposed to stand behind you. But that night, I realized I was standing alone. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No one knocked. No one called. My phone buzzed only once, with a message from my sister. "You really messed things up." I stared at that sentence for a full minute before locking my phone again. Not a question. Not a concern. Just blame. It was like being exiled without ever having left. I walked downstairs and felt the atmosphere shift. My mother, normally the peacekeeper, didn't even look at me as I passed. My father? He was gone. I assumed he left for work early, but I found out later he just didn't want to see me. What hurt wasn't the yelling. It was the coldness that came after. Like I had become something they were ashamed of. I had always been the one to play by the rules. I stayed out of trouble, worked hard in school, got into a decent university on my own merit. But none of that seemed to matter when my brother was in trouble. His name is Ryan. Older by 2 years, but we couldn't have been more different. He was the wild one, charming, reckless, always getting into things he shouldn't. Drugs, fights, girls, he left damage in every direction and somehow always got forgiven. My parents called it a phase. They called it growing pains. They called it everything except what it really was, selfishness. Dangerous, entitled selfishness. Last year, he was caught in an assault case at a bar. He claimed self-defense. The victim had a shattered jaw and 2 broken ribs. The charges didn't stick because, conveniently, no one testified against him. I knew he was guilty. I overheard him bragging about it on the phone. But my parents said, "Let it go. He learned his lesson." He didn't. This time, it was worse. He was being charged in a hit-and-run accident. A pedestrian was seriously injured. And once again, he had a story ready. He claimed he wasn't driving, that the car had been stolen earlier that day and mysteriously returned to the driveway that evening. The police found damage on the bumper and blood in the undercarriage. But no one could place him at the scene, except for me. I had seen him that day. I saw him get into the car. I saw him come home nervous, sweating, asking me to lie if anyone asked. I didn't say anything then, but I knew it was only a matter of time before this blew up. And it did. When the investigators came around, I told the truth. I saw him behind the wheel. That was it. Nothing dramatic. Just a fact. But that fact was enough to unravel everything. My father called a family meeting the next night. He stood at the head of the table like a general issuing orders. "We need to protect Ryan," he said. "We've been through too much to let this family be torn apart." My sister nodded. My mother wrung her hands. "And me?" I just stared at them. "You'll retract your statement," he continued. "Say you were mistaken." "I won't," I said. That's when he slammed the table. That's when the yelling started. And then, the lunch. Now, days after, the house was quieter but heavier. No one spoke unless they had to. They avoided me like I was a walking betrayal. At dinner, plates clinked in silence. My mother passed food to everyone but me. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. I got up early each morning and left the house before anyone else. I wandered the city, drinking burnt coffee from gas stations, sitting in empty parks, trying to make sense of what I'd done wrong, if I'd done anything wrong at all. I told the truth. That's supposed to matter, isn't it? But every time I looked at my phone, there was another message, from a cousin, a family friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, saying things like, "Can't believe you'd turn on your brother," or, "Blood should come before the law." Ryan had clearly been spreading his version of the story. In his version, I was jealous. I wanted him gone. I was lying to get attention. And people believed him because that's what they wanted to believe. The worst part was losing my job. Not because of anything official, but because of whispers. I worked as an intern at a nonprofit that helped victims of violent crime. The same day my brother's case hit the local news, I was pulled into my supervisor's office. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't do anything wrong. But this is messy. We just can't afford to be involved in anything controversial." I nodded. I understood. But it felt like the final blow. I started sleeping in my car. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Every corner reminded me of who they expected me to be, and who I wasn't willing to become. One night, my mother found me outside in the driveway. She tapped on the window, tears in her eyes. For a second I thought maybe, just maybe, she came to apologize. To understand. Instead, she whispered, "Can't you just do this one thing for us? Just this once?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I shook my head and rolled the window back up. She walked away. The trial date loomed closer. I was subpoenaed. I had no choice but to testify now, and they knew it. Still, my father tried to convince me to forget things. To say you're unsure. My sister offered me money. Ryan sent me voice memos pretending to be sorry, begging me to fix this. I didn't respond. I started keeping records, screenshots, recordings, dates and times, because I no longer trusted what they might do. I felt paranoid, but I also felt strong. Like even though they tried to make me small, I was growing roots somewhere else, inside myself. My lawyer, assigned by the court as part of the witness protection protocols, met with me and said, "You're brave. I hope you know that. Most people fold under this kind of pressure." But I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. Tired of carrying a truth no one wanted. Tired of being punished for doing the right thing. Still, when I looked in the mirror, I recognized myself. And that mattered more than all their disappointment combined. The morning of the trial, I woke up before dawn, my heart pounding like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. I looked in the mirror and saw the same face, but the eyes staring back felt sharper, less afraid. I wasn't just testifying today. I was letting go of a version of my life that never protected me to begin with. I dressed in silence. No one else in the house stirred. My mother had stopped speaking to me entirely the week before. My father didn't even acknowledge my presence anymore. Ryan had moved back in with his girlfriend. He didn't want to be near me either, not that I wanted to be near him. I took the long route to the courthouse, driving with the windows down even though it was cold. The wind against my face helped keep my nerves from spiraling. I parked a few blocks away and walked the last stretch alone, holding my breath each time I passed a familiar face. Inside the courtroom, it was even colder. Ryan sat at the defense table in a navy suit that didn't belong to him. He looked cleaner than usual, composed, but I saw his leg bouncing beneath the table. Our eyes met once. He smirked. I turned away. The prosecution called me after the opening statements. I stood, walked to the front, and raised my hand as I swore to tell the truth. The moment felt heavier than it should have. But I reminded myself why I was here, not to destroy anyone, but to stop lying for people who never earned my protection. I spoke clearly. I told the court exactly what I saw: Ryan behind the wheel. Ryan speeding away. Ryan walking in the door afterward, rattled and panicked. His attorney tried to discredit me. She asked why I had waited to come forward. I told her the truth: I was scared. She asked if I had a grudge against my brother. I said no, just boundaries. She asked if I had any evidence. That's when I smiled. Actually, I do. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB drive. The prosecutor had already received a copy earlier, but this was for the judge to admit into evidence. On it were recordings, conversations with my family pressuring me to change my story, messages from Ryan asking me to lie, audio clips where my father threatened to kick me out. It was all there. For weeks I'd kept those files like poison in my pocket, unsure if I'd ever need to use them. But when I handed that drive over, I felt the courtroom shift. It wasn't just my word anymore. It was proof. Ryan's lawyer tried to argue the recordings were coerced or out of context. But the tone was unmistakable. Manipulation. Intimidation. Desperation. The jury heard it. The judge did too. When I stepped down from the stand, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: solid. My legs weren't shaking. My breath was steady. I passed Ryan on my way back to my seat, and he didn't look so smug anymore. The rest of the trial unraveled fast after that. The prosecution had built a strong case, but my testimony, and especially the recordings, lit the whole thing on fire. Witnesses who had previously been hesitant suddenly came forward. A neighbor reported seeing Ryan wipe the bumper that night. A gas station clerk remembered him buying a drink with blood on his shirt. Bit by bit, the picture formed. Ryan wasn't just guilty, he had tried to orchestrate a cover-up with our family's help. My family didn't show up to court after that day. I figured they were embarrassed. Or maybe afraid. Either way, I didn't care. I had done what I came to do. But that wasn't the end. A week later, the prosecutor called me into his office. He said, "There's more here than just your brother's crime. What your family did, trying to suppress a witness, is obstruction of justice. It's serious." I swallowed hard. "What happens now?" "That's up to the district attorney," he said. "But if they pursue charges, we may need your cooperation again." I nodded. I already knew what my answer would be. I wasn't protecting anyone anymore. A few days later, the news broke. My family's names were listed in a preliminary report detailing a possible conspiracy to interfere with a criminal investigation. The story spread fast. Local media outlets ran headlines like, "Family of accused in hit-and-run faces legal trouble of their own." Neighbors stopped waving. Old friends stopped calling. My parents went silent. But what surprised me was the messages I started getting from strangers. People I didn't know sent emails, DMs, even handwritten letters, thanking me. Some said they had been pressured by family before. Some said they wished they'd spoken up when they had the chance. Others just said, "You're brave." One message stuck with me most. It was from a woman named Lillian, whose son had been hit by a car in a similar case, except the witness in that situation stayed silent. "My boy never got justice," she wrote. "You're doing what so many of us prayed someone would do." I cried after reading that. Not because I felt heroic, but because I finally understood the impact of what I did. This wasn't just about me or my family. It was about truth. and the cost of silence. Ryan was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 2 suspended. He cried during the sentencing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the voicemail he left me, the one where he said, "If you do this, you're dead to me." I'd already grieved that loss. As for my parents, the DA decided not to press full charges. Instead, they entered into a plea deal, public apology, community service, and court-mandated ethics counseling. Their reputations were ruined anyway. My mother's position on the PDA was revoked. My father's name was quietly removed from his company's promotional materials. They reached out once through my sister, who texted me. "They want to talk." I replied, "I'm not ready." And I wasn't. I'm still not. But I moved out finally. I found a small apartment uptown, near my new job. Yes, new job. One of the nonprofit's directors had followed the trial and offered me a position at a different branch. "We need people who stand up," she said. It felt like the universe finally whispered, "I see you." In the weeks that followed, I started writing again, something I hadn't done since high school. I wrote down everything, every moment, every feeling. And then, without really planning to, I submitted an article to a local paper. They published it. Then another outlet picked it up. Then a podcast invited me on. Then a national organization for witness advocacy asked me to speak at their annual conference. What had begun as an act of survival turned into something bigger, something that gave other people the permission to speak, too. And in all of it, the greatest victory wasn't Ryan going to prison or my parents being exposed. It was that I reclaimed my voice. They tried to take it. They tried to silence it. But I used it, and it echoed louder than they ever imagined. It's strange how quiet peace can be. Not the kind you fight for in court or beg for in your family's kitchen, but the kind that shows up slowly, like the sun rising through blinds you forgot to close. It doesn't announce itself. It just replaces the chaos, breath by breath, until one day you realize you're no longer holding your chest every morning when you wake up. That's how it happened for me. A few months after the sentencing, I woke up in my tiny apartment and felt something unfamiliar. Stillness. Not the anxious stillness of waiting, but a true, weightless calm. I brewed coffee without checking my phone. I opened the windows and didn't flinch at the world outside. There were no incoming calls from my father, no guilt-trip texts from my mother. My brother was behind bars, and I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. The first thing I did that morning was go to the bookstore down the block. I used to love reading, but somewhere along the way I stopped. Maybe because my life started feeling too much like the kind of fiction I never wanted to live. I picked out a novel, just something simple, soft, and spent the whole day on a park bench reading it cover to cover. Nobody interrupted me. No one asked anything of me. That, right there, felt like wealth. I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss them sometimes. Not the chaos. Not the manipulation. But the illusion I used to cling to, the one where I had a place to belong. Where Sunday dinners were about laughter and not loyalty tests. Where my father's voice meant safety instead of fear. But I've learned that sometimes grief isn't just for people who die. Sometimes you grieve the life you thought you had. The version of family you swore would protect you. The love you now realize came with conditions. The nonprofit I worked with began training me as a legal advocate. It wasn't glamorous work, but it meant something. I helped victims understand the court process. I explained protection orders. I listened when they were scared, and I told them what someone once told me. "You're not crazy. You're not wrong. You're just brave." One of the girls I worked with reminded me of myself. 17. Soft-spoken. Pressured by her older brother to lie for him in a robbery case. She came into our office shaking. I sat beside her and told her, word for word, what I'd wished someone had said to me. "You don't owe anyone your silence. Especially not someone who wouldn't stay silent for you," she cried. I held her hand. And when she left that day, she looked taller. Straighter. Like truth had given her back her spine. I realized then that this is how cycles break. Not with fireworks, but with people who quietly choose differently. As for my own family, they remain distant. My sister texted once on my birthday. Just 3 words. Hope you're well. I didn't reply, but I didn't block her either. Progress comes in inches sometimes. I heard through a cousin that my father had started attending church again. That my mother had taken up gardening. That Ryan had gotten into a fight in prison and was placed in solitary for a few weeks. I felt nothing. Not joy. Not revenge. Just a soft closing of the chapter. Because here's the truth, my revenge was never about them suffering. It was about me not suffering anymore. I didn't need them to hurt. I just needed them to stop hurting me. And they finally did, when I stopped showing up for it. One day, I got a letter. It didn't have a return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was my father's. I opened it with hands that barely trembled. He wrote, "You were right. I just couldn't admit it. I don't know if this fixes anything, but I needed you to know, I see it now." That was it. No apology. No invitation back. Just those few lines. I placed the letter in a box at the back of my closet. Not because I wanted to forget it, but because I didn't want it dictating what came next. I've learned to live without closure. To find my own. There's a lake I drive to sometimes, an hour out of town. I go there to sit, to think, to just be. I bring sandwiches and a notebook. I write things I'll never publish. I write letters I'll never send. Sometimes I write to my younger self. Sometimes to my future one. In one entry I wrote, "You did not betray them. You simply refused to betray yourself." It's my favorite sentence I've ever written. Life doesn't look like I imagined it would. It's smaller in some ways, quieter. But it's mine now. Not borrowed from a family script. Not borrowed from guilt or fear or loyalty to the wrong people. Just mine. And that, in the end, is more than enough. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to lie for someone. Especially when that someone wears your last name. Growing up, we're taught that family means everything. That blood is thicker than water. That loyalty to your kin is a virtue, even when they're wrong. But what we're not often taught is where love ends and enabling begins, where protection turns into participation, and silence becomes complicity. This story, my story, taught me that truth isn't the enemy of love. In fact, sometimes it's the only proof that it was ever real. There's a loneliness that comes from standing up for yourself, especially against the people who raised you. It's a unique kind of isolation, one that whispers to you in the quiet hours, asking if you've done the right thing. When I refused to testify falsely, when I chose honesty over allegiance, I lost my place at the family table. I lost my safety net, my emotional scaffolding, my entire support system. But what I gained was myself. For years I had been shrinking, biting my tongue, folding myself into the shapes they found acceptable, smiling through moments that twisted my gut. I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace was the same as being at peace. It's not. Keeping the peace often means trading parts of yourself for silence. It means watching people hurt others and pretending your hands are tied. And it slowly erodes who you are, one compromise at a time. Saying no was terrifying. But it was also the most honest thing I've ever done. The moment I chose truth, the ground beneath me cracked, but something else began to grow. Resilience. Independence. A deeper understanding of my own values. I learned how to sit with discomfort. I learned how to weather public judgment. I learned that being misunderstood doesn't mean you're wrong, and being vilified doesn't mean you're evil. Most importantly, I learned that boundaries are not betrayals. So many of us carry the weight of families that taught us love is conditional. That your worth depends on obedience, on loyalty, on silence. We bend, we yield, we hurt ourselves to keep that love alive. But true love, the kind that heals, never demands the death of your integrity. There is a high cost to doing the right thing when everyone around you is invested in the lie. You risk your relationships, your stability, your identity. But the reward is immeasurable. You gain a version of yourself who no longer needs to beg for validation. Who can look in the mirror and say, "I told the truth, even when it burned." One of the most heartbreaking realizations was understanding that not everyone who says they love you actually knows how to love you in a way that's healthy. My family loved me in their own way, but that love was entangled with control, image, and expectation. The second I stepped out of the role they wrote for me, I became the villain. And yet, I would rather be the villain in their story than the victim in mine. This isn't about revenge. It never was. I didn't speak out to punish my brother or to hurt my parents. I did it to protect someone else, someone who had already been hurt in a hit and run. Someone whose life had been shattered by the very accident my family was trying to bury. That person mattered. Their story mattered. And if I had stayed silent, I would have been complicit in their continued suffering. Doing the right thing often means making peace with being alone. But alone isn't the same as abandoned. In solitude, I found clarity. I found new people who respected me not for my last name but for my principles. I found community in the quiet courage of others who'd walked a similar path and survived it. And eventually, I found belonging, not through bloodlines, but through truth lines. The world will tell you that being the bigger person means forgiving without accountability, staying quiet for harmony's sake, or sacrificing your truth for the sake of appearances. That is not growth. That is submission. Real growth is speaking up, even when your voice shakes. It's drawing a line in the sand, even when no one stands with you. It's choosing justice, even when it costs you everything familiar. I don't regret a single step I took. Not the silence I broke. Not the courtroom testimony. Not even the long nights crying alone in my car because I had no home to go back to. All of it forged something unshakable inside me. This story isn't just about family. It's about courage. About choosing the kind of life that doesn't require you to dim your light so others can remain comfortable in the dark. To anyone reading this who's ever been asked to betray themselves for someone else's benefit, I say this: you are not selfish. You are not weak. You are not wrong. You are surviving in a system that often rewards silence and punishes truth-telling. But there is strength in your spine. There is honor in your honesty. And one day, you will look back at the version of yourself who said, "No," and you will thank them for saving your life. The lesson I carry forward is this: telling the truth won't always keep you safe. But it will always set you free.